Have you ever noticed how some places just seem to have this buzz about them, this energy? Well, Mysuru in Karnataka definitely
Yeah.
has that right now. And it all goes back to a land deal from 2021 that is kind of snowballed into this whole other thing. And now everyone's asking some really big questions, way bigger than just who owns what piece of land.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how something like allocating land, which seems like a pretty standard part of developing a city, can suddenly become this huge controversy about how things are run and who's really accountable.
Hmm.
And yeah, 2021, that's when this whole saga started. It's still going strong, too.
Yeah, for sure. So at the center of this whole mess is the Mysuru Urban Development Authority, or MUDA. They're basically the ones who plan and develop the city. And the big controversy we're going to be digging into here is all about some really desirable residential plots that they gave out.
Yeah.
And as we try to put all the pieces together, it seems like there might have been some serious slip-ups along the way, like allegations of shady dealings, things not adding up. And then you have the Lokayukta, which is Karnataka's anti-corruption watchdog. They did an investigation, but their conclusions, well, they kind of just made things even messier.
It's interesting how when a body like the Lokayukta, whose whole job is to fight corruption, gets involved, it just highlights how serious those initial concerns were. It's not just a case of, oops, we made a little administrative error. It really suggests that there might have been a significant breach of trust and probably even procedures.
So for everyone listening today, our goal is to break this whole MEDA situation down. What are the main issues that have everyone so riled up? What are the different viewpoints we need to think about? And probably the most important question of all, why should this story from a city way down south in India matter to you, no matter where you are in the world?
This Mysuru story, while, yeah, it's about a very specific place and situation, it actually touches on a really fundamental question that should matter to all of us.
Hmm.
How do we make sure that the systems that are supposed to govern development and keep corruption in check actually work, especially when you're dealing with a lot of power and a lot of resources?
Okay, so to really get this whole thing, we have to talk about this thing called the 50.50 scheme. Imagine this. The city needs your land to grow, so you have to give it up. The idea behind this 50.50 thing is that you get half of that land back, but as developed plots. So on the surface, it seems like a pretty fair deal, right? You'd lose some land, you gain some developed plots, but it's within this system, this supposedly fair system, that things seem to have gone very wrong.
You're absolutely right. The idea behind these kinds of schemes is usually about giving fair compensation to people who have to give up their land for development. But the problem is, as with most things, the devil is in the details. How do you decide the value of that original land? How do you decide who gets those developed plots? What's in place to stop people from taking advantage of the system? These are the really important questions that come up when these schemes are investigated.
And here's the main point that everyone's arguing about.
Yeah.
Back in 2021, 14 very, very desirable plots in Vijayanagara, which is a prime location in Mysuru, were given out. And guess what? They were allegedly given to Parvathi BM. Does that name sound familiar? Well, she's the wife of Siddaramaiah, who just so happened to be the chief minister back then. And guess what? He's the chief minister again now.
Oh, wow. Well, the fact that the person who got these prime plots is so closely connected to the chief minister, that definitely raises a red flag right away. You can't help but wonder if there was any influence involved and if everything was done by the book, no special favors or anything.
And here's where things get even more complicated. The story is that this allocation of plots was done in exchange for 3.16 acres of land in a place called Kesare village. But here's the catch. People are seriously questioning who actually owned that land in Kesare. And on top of that, you got this prime land in Vijayanagara being swapped for land in Kesare village.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, there's a huge difference in how much they're worth. And let's be real, how appealing they are.
That difference in location and value between the two properties that were exchanged, yeah, that's a classic sign in cases where people are accusing each other of favoritism or doing things improperly. It just begs the question, was this exchange really based on what the land was actually worth? Was it a fair deal?
So because of all this, the Lokayukta, that anti-corruption body, they stepped in and started investigating. And then in February of 2025, they released what's called a B report. Now, what a B report usually means is that they didn't find enough solid evidence to actually file charges, which basically means the case is closed. So in this case, the Lokayukta's report said that they didn't have enough to go after Siddaramaiah, his wife Parvathi, her brother Mallikarjuna Swamy, or even the landowner Devaraju J.
Okay, so technically a B report means they're closing the case because they don't have enough evidence. But how people interpret that, especially in a high-profile case like this one, well, that can be a whole other story. I mean, it could actually mean that nobody did anything wrong, But it could also mean that maybe the investigation itself wasn't thorough enough.
That's exactly what a lot of people are saying. They're really focusing on the language that the Lokayukta used in the report.
Hmm.
People are saying it's way too soft. They use words like acceptable, accepted, even can be accepted. It doesn't exactly sound like they were really scrutinizing everything. And then if you look at how many questions they asked each person involved, the chief minister got 24 questions, his wife got 14, her brother 16, and the landowner got 20. A lot of people are arguing that for a case this big, with such valuable land and these accusations of wrongdoing at the highest level, well, it just doesn't look like they really dug deep enough.
Yeah, I see what you mean. The language in an investigative report and how much they grill people with questions, those can be big clues about how thorough the investigation actually was. If they're not using strong language and they're not asking tons of detailed questions, well, it's no surprise that people start wondering if they really did their homework.
Right. And to make things even more interesting, you have the social activist, Nahamai Krishna, who is the one who first blew the whistle on this whole thing. He's been very vocal about how much he disagrees with the Lokayukta's report. He straight up called it a whitewash. And he's not the only one who thinks that. The Enforcement Directorate, or ED, they've got their own investigation going on, focusing on whether any money laundering happened because of this land deal. And they've actually done something pretty unusual. They've gone to court to challenge the Lokayukta's findings. Their argument is that the Lokayukta just flat out ignored some really important evidence. So now you have these two big investigative bodies who seem to be disagreeing with each other. It's like they're seeing two completely different versions of what happened.
Whoa, having those two big organizations at odds with each other, that's a big deal. It basically means they can't agree on what the evidence means. And it makes you wonder, are the systems we have in place to keep things in check, are they really working? The ED going to court, that means they think there's more to this case and they want a more thorough investigation.
Okay, let's go back to this 50.50 scheme for a minute. Because the more you look at it, the more it seems like the problems with the scheme itself are at the heart of this whole controversy. People are saying that the way the scheme was set up, or maybe how it was actually put into practice, well, it basically made it too easy for people to abuse it. And they're pointing to the chief minister's wife as the perfect example. The land swap seems totally lopsided, and then you've got those unanswered questions about who actually owned that original piece of land.
Yeah.
It really throws a spotlight on the flaws in the system.
Any system that deals with exchanging valuable public resources, especially land, they have to have really, really strong safeguards built in, checks and balances. That means you need transparent ways to figure out how much things are worth. You got to make absolutely sure who owns what and the rules about who qualifies. Those have to be crystal clear. It sounds like in this case, those safeguards were either too weak or nobody bothered to enforce them.
As you can imagine, this whole MUDA situation has blown up into a political battle. The opposition parties, the BJP and the Janata Dal, secular, they're not holding back. They're demanding that Chief Minister Siddaramaiah resigns. And they're not mincing words about the Lokayukta report either. They're calling it a total sham, saying it's all just a cover-up.
In this kind of political climate, where everyone's already at each other's throats, accusations of corruption, especially if they involve high-ranking officials, well, it's like throwing a match into a powder keg. The opposition is going to jump on that, using it to attack the ruling party and say they're not fit to govern.
And of course, the Congress Party, they're standing by their leader, saying he did nothing wrong. Their argument is that the ED investigation is politically motivated, maybe time to make them look bad. They're also saying, hey, this 50.50 scheme that everyone's so worked up about was actually created when the BJP was in charge.
That's a really important point. It shows that sometimes the problems with how the government works, the weaknesses in the system, they can stick around even when different political parties are in power. And it makes it really difficult to say who's to blame for what. You have all these political narratives that can make it hard to see what the real issues are.
It's interesting because even though the Lokayukta's report basically cleared the chief minister and his family of any wrongdoing in this land deal, they did point out some pretty big problems with how MUDA itself operates. So this isn't just about one bad deal. It seems like it's exposing a whole bunch of issues within the organization itself.
Right. So even if they didn't find enough evidence to prove that high-level corruption happened, the investigation can still show that there are weaknesses in the system, things they're doing wrong, or problems with how they're being run. And those things need to be fixed to prevent more problems in the future.
For example, the report said that MUDA has been creating these residential areas, they call them layouts, but they haven't even bothered to set up proper legal rules for acquiring the land. They've been relying on these things called relinquished deeds, which honestly sounds like a way to get around the usual legal protections that landowners have.
If they don't have a clear, solid legal process for acquiring land, that can cause so many problems. It can create all this uncertainty and lead to disagreements. Landowners could end up in a bad spot, and the development authority too. It could even end up in court, with people accusing them of being unfair.
And get this. Apparently, MUDA has thousands of plots of land just sitting there vacant. They don't even know what's going on with them. And this is in Mysuru, where there's a massive demand for housing and land. It's like they've completely lost track of a really valuable public asset.
Yeah, that's a big red flag when you have public assets like land not being properly managed, no transparency, no records. It's a recipe for disaster. You can end up with mismanagement, people encroaching on the land, and missed opportunities to develop the city and bring in money.
Oh, and it gets even worse. The Lokayukta's report also mentioned that the commissioners at MUDA, they've been ignoring the Karnataka Urban Development Authorities Act from 1987. They've been making big decisions without following the proper rules, not even holding votes when they should be. And get this, when someone reported these problems to the state government, they basically ignored them. It really makes you wonder, who's holding these people accountable?
When you have a public body like MUDA, it is absolutely crucial that they follow the laws and the rules. That's how you make sure things are done fairly and that nobody is abusing their power. If they're just ignoring those rules, well, it raises some serious concerns about whether they're playing by the rules and if they're really acting in the best interests of the public.
And it doesn't stop there. Apparently, the chairman of MUDA has way too much power. He's been making all these important decisions without having to talk to anyone else or get their approval. It's not how a development authority should work. It should be more collaborative, not just one person calling all the shots.
Yeah, too much power concentrated in one person's hands, especially in a public organization with so much responsibility. That's just asking for trouble. You need different perspectives, different voices to weigh in. Otherwise, you risk decisions being made without enough oversight or accountability.
This is wild. The report also mentioned that some officials at MUDA have been in the same positions for years, even decades. They've never been transferred. The Lokayukta even called it a monopoly-like functioning, which suggests that it's a really closed-off environment. And in that kind of environment, it's way easier for favoritism and even corruption to take hold and just fester.
Yeah, when people stay in the same positions for too long without being moved around, it can lead to all sorts of problems. People can get too comfortable, too set in their ways, and sometimes those professional lines can blur and personal relationships can start to influence things. That's when accountability can really go out the window.
And to top it all off, the Lokayukta found that there are no clear rules about how those compensatory land allotments, like the ones from the 50.50 scheme, are supposed to be made. It sounds like they were basically winging it, making it up as they went along. That's hardly a recipe for fairness or transparency, is it?
You need clear, transparent rules, especially when you're dealing with things as important as land allocation. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to individual discretion, and that can lead to inconsistencies, bias, and even corruption. People need to know that these valuable public resources are being distributed fairly.
So what about holding people accountable for all of this? The Lokayukta did recommend that 4 officials should face disciplinary action. But here's the thing. 3 of them are already retired. And remember that land deal that started this whole thing? It happened almost 20 years ago. It seems like they're trying to fix things way after the damage is done.
Trying to hold people accountable is important, but when it takes this long, it just highlights how difficult it is to make sure people are held responsible for their actions in a timely manner. And when it takes decades to take action, it makes you question if those disciplinary actions are going to be effective. I mean, what can you really do to someone who's already retired?
Meanwhile, the ED seems to be digging a lot deeper than the Lokayukta did. They're saying that over 1,000 sites were given out illegally, often to people who were basically acting as stand-ins for more powerful figures. Those are what we call benami transactions. They've even questioned a former MUDA commissioner, and apparently they're looking into the role of Chief Minister Siddaramaiah's personal assistant too. Clearly, the ED thinks there's a much bigger story here than what the Lokayukta's report showed.
The ED focusing on those illegal allotments and the benami transactions, that suggests that this might not just be an isolated incident. They're looking at whether there was a bigger, more organized effort to abuse the system within MUDA.
So, stepping back for a moment, why should you, as a listener, care about what's happening with MUDA in Mysuru? Well, it raises some really fundamental questions about how our cities grow, how transparent our institutions are, and how they're held accountable. And most importantly, it's about how public land, which really belongs to all of us, is being managed.
It's about the quality of life in our communities. When there are concerns about corruption, when the systems seem broken, it affects everyone. It can lead to inequality, unfair access to housing, and problems with essential services.
Absolutely. If these allegations are true, then we have to ask ourselves, are the people who are supposed to be watching over these institutions really doing their job? Are they effective, especially when powerful people are involved?
Mhm.
And having these two major investigative bodies, the Lokayukta and the ED, basically contradicting each other, that doesn't exactly make you feel confident that the system's working properly.
When different investigative bodies are working from different sets of facts and coming to completely different conclusions, it undermines people's trust in the whole system. It creates chaos, gives people a chance to take advantage of the situation, and makes it really hard to hold anyone accountable. And it also raises the question, do these agencies need clearer guidelines? Do they need to be working together more effectively?
So where do we stand today, April 10th, 2025? The ED has officially challenged the Lokayukta decision to close the case, and that's being handled in a special court in Bengaluru. And their money laundering investigation is still going strong. Oh, and here's another interesting development. The Lokayukta has said that they're going to launch another investigation into all the land allotments that happened under the 50 below 50 scheme between 2016 and 2024. This suggests that this one case in Mysuru might just be the tip of the iceberg. And of course, all of this is happening against the backdrop of Karnataka politics. So the political fallout from all of this, well, it could be huge.
It's clear that this is far from over. The legal challenges, the new investigations, the outcome of all of this could have major consequences. Not just for the people directly involved, but for the political landscape.
It all boils down to this question of balance. You've got the need for progress for development. Then you have the influence of political power, which, let's be honest, is always there. And then you have the absolute need for governments and public institutions to be transparent and accountable to the people they serve. And what happens when that trust erodes? What are the real-world consequences for ordinary people when these questions are raised?
What's happening in Mysuru is like a case study. It shows us how urban development and efforts to fight corruption actually play out in the real world. It challenges us to look beyond the headlines and really examine the systems, the weaknesses, and ultimately the impact on the people these institutions are supposed to serve.
So there you have it. The MUDA situation, full of twists and turns, accusations, investigations, and political drama. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep asking questions, and stay engaged. Because what's happening in Mysuru with its land deals and its struggles for accountability, well, it's a story that's relevant to all of us.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that these issues are not just local stories. They're happening everywhere, and they have a real impact on people's lives. So stay informed, stay curious, and let's keep working together to make sure that development happens in a way that's fair, transparent, and accountable to everyone.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really interesting conversation.